Hi, welcome back to week 2 of the weekly Astro update. I'm joined by my good friend Christa from Practical Astros.
Hi there. Let's go into week 2 of August. August is hot and ready at this point.
We're going Wednesday to Wednesday to honor our good friend Hermes, Mercury, the god of communication and astrology. So we're covering from the 7th to the 14th. So you can see that on our weekly or monthly calendar, what we'll be covering. And we've got this breakdown of the month. And Peter from AstroSeek does this really great graphic, and that shows us where the planets are going, where they've been for the whole of the month.
Well, I love that Peter does this because it gives you a visualization of just the entire zodiac, the whole zodiac. And so you see where there's movement, where there's an absence of movement. It doesn't show the moon because the moon goes through every single sign within a month. And it doesn't show the sun because the sun is primarily, at least in Leo for this month, it is ingressing into Virgo. But you get to see, okay, well, there's Saturn still over there in Pisces. You see that Pluto right there at that 0 degree of Aquarius moving backwards into Capricorn. You see how quickly Venus is moving. Usually Venus and Mercury, you see those lines kind of comparable and distance, but because Mercury is retrograde, it's kind of going back over. But you see how little the outer planets move and how quickly the inner planets move. So I like just getting that visualization. Where is going to be the swiftest change? Where are things going to be returning? Where are things going to be continued to be kind of slowed down with the retrogrades? It's just a nice visualization of the planetary movements.
But yeah, the other thing I got from this as well is we can very clearly see who's affected. And we see the mutable signs showing up here with the opposition to Saturn, Venus and Mercury traveling from, I'm going to struggle to find my words again, Virgo back to Leo. So here we're going back into the fixed energy of Leo. And we also see Gemini, another mutable sign that's squaring Virgo. So we see this is where all the action's happening, and it's really clear to see it then. When we break it down into this is squaring that, this is squaring that, it's harder to see the full picture. But here we can see this full picture of, okay, there's a lot of action here and there's a focus here. And then we've got this
the visualization, the visualization that just came through was, if you look at these almost as like raindrops, this is where water is going to be poured down to kind of feed different parts of your chart. Other parts of your chart are not going to have rain this month, but the others are going to have rain, which is nutrients, and it's life-giving, and it's maybe there's weeds there and those will also grow. But just like when we say focus on an area of a chart, just think of like the energy that you give to certain topics and subjects. The more energy you give it, the more it's going to grow. And so these mutable topics are definitely being fed this month.
Yeah. So if you're not sure what the mutable signs are, we're looking at Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and also Sagittarius, because that will have the opposition from Gemini and a square from Pisces and Virgo. And then when we're talking about the fixed signs, we're also looking at Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So those are the signs that are activated there. So if you've got your sun, moon, rising there, but also if you've got any other planets, if you don't know, you can go to astroseek.com and enter your birth data, and it will tell you. I've got a video on my YouTube that shows you how to do that if you don't know, but you can pull up your chart and get a free chart and it will tell you. And then just look for this little sign for Gemini, this little sign for Virgo, and it will tell you what house. And then I've got another video that goes through the house topics, and that's what kind of areas in your life are being activated, what kind of topics you might expect. So that's what. And
if you like the way she does that, you can hire her as an astrologer to read your chart.
Yeah, both Christa and I have our books open, and there'll be links to, and there is on the start and end screens as well, links to us if you want to get more details and information. And the other thing is that not all these transits affect everybody, because it does depend on where your planets are in your chart. So you don't have to think that everything is activating everything in your chart. But certainly if you've got a lot of placements in this, it might feel like it this month. Because like Christa says, it's raining on your chart in these places. So should we get
Yeah, I
into?
had someone send me a message with a picture of their chart, and they're like, "What am I supposed to make of this?" And I was
Mm,
like, "Nothing. You just hire an astrologer."
yes. Yeah, because it's so hard to
Yeah.
see everything. I mean, that's how I started, was trying to work out my own chart at once. And it
Yep.
was like, okay, do I hire an astrologer or do I learn astrology? And I was having a ninth house activation, which is
Both.
about studying. So yeah, I
Yep.
did both.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
recommend using your chart to study astrology is a great way, because you're gonna have the most memorable anecdotal experience as you start to understand what transits actually mean. But for the first time, if you're looking at it, it just looks like a foreign language.
Mm,
So hire an astrologer to introduce you to it, and then start going down the rabbit holes, because that's pretty much what it is. So we get to start off week 2 with a very exciting conjunction. The PBS in the US conjunction junction. What's your function? That's what I always think of, especially for these. Um, we talked earlier about how imagining what a conjunction is. So conjunction isn't actually considered an aspect, because aspect means to see. There's a line of sight, but when two planets are right on top of each other, they kind of fuse. They mingle together. Their significations are kind of inextricable from each other. And the way that I imagined it was, there's a communal bowl, and both Mars and Jupiter are kind of dumping the contents of their pockets together. And then it's a free for all of whatever tool either one wants to use. And with Mars is action, and it's, movement, and it's being forward, and it can be severance, and it can be sharp, especially in an air sign. There's like the speed of thought. And then with Jupiter is not at home in Gemini. And so it's a resourceful, or a planet needing to be resourceful, so not as comfortable, but it's expansive, and it's about creating some sort of order of things, but in the hungry for information planet or sign of Gemini. And so we have these two powerhouse planets together, Jupiter and Mars, commingling their significations in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is there retrograde, but still at home, barely in Virgo, in its own bound. And so there's a line of sight, at least for Mercury there. It's a square by whole sign house, but it can see it. So we start this off Wednesday with Mars Jupiter conjunction. And being a Mars Jupiter conjunct in Hermes's sign native, I can say to you, it's not all bad. It's often pretty exciting. It can be a little bit over the top. It can be unhinged. It can be hard to wrangle, but it is always inspiring, and it is always like it's an endless source of fuel. So what house is Gemini for you? What sort of fuel is going to be ignited? It can be destructive. I mean, Mars is known for being severing, but it doesn't have to be destructive, especially in an air sign. What sort of air themes are going to be coming through, whether it's intellectual or communication or writing, inspiration, ideas. Gemini is a spring sign, so there's a newness, there's a hunger. And so, but it's definitely a loud, sparkly fireworks sort of a transit to start this week.
It really is. And it's nice to see it opposite the moon there in Sagittarius, because
Yep.
I was looking at the archetypes for it, and I've got like this questing energy, where it's because Mars wants to do things and take action, and Jupiter is the planet of like wisdom and faith and belief. So you think of like the Crusades and things like that, where the quest for the Holy Grail or something, where it was like a high-minded idealist quest. And then you've got Sagittarius, which is the sign of the quest of like going on some sort of mission. As long as there's a mission, then Sagittarians are happy, or they're learning, or there's always some goal that they're seeking. So to be opposite that moon, which is like our needs, our inner needs, and nurturing, and what we're sort of seeking internally, as well as our external circumstances. So there's a tension with an opposition, and oppositions are of the nature of Saturn, which can be like asking for time and asking for a balance. But sometimes with that opposition with the moon, it's bringing, okay, is there a difference between what you're inner needs are seeking and what these planets are asking for, and how can you reconcile that balance. It feels like that's what's being asked for. And again, with this conjunction, I think of like, I'm a childless cat lady myself, so I don't have teenagers or whatever, but I have had a long-term partner with children, and I've got nephews, and I know that if you're sat side by side in the car with them, they'll open up a lot more, and you'll get to the heart of whatever's bothering them, which you often won't do if you sit across the table eye to eye and say, what's up? But often,
Great point.
yeah, the car journey was usually the one, let me take you somewhere and drop you off and ask some open questions. And usually that'll be where we get to the heart of whatever the actual problem is. And they're not looking me in the eye, and they can be fiddling with the phone or whatever. But, you know, we can get to whatever the issue is. And it's that same thing. They're not looking each other in the eye, but their interests are merged in that way. And it's the start of a new cycle again. You know, we're not getting to that waxing point of something growing. We can't see what it is yet, but something's definitely beginning, and it's like really interesting to have that moon in the exact opposition with it.
And Saturn at a pretty close square. I mean, Saturn is over there in Pisces, retrograde 7 degrees, and Pisces. So, and then Venus and Mercury are also in Virgo. So there is a planet in every single mutable house. So look at the mutable houses in your own chart. There's going to be the opposition. The moon is witnessing and interpreting the conjunction of Jupiter, Mars in your Gemini house, but also engaged is that Venus and Mercury still in Virgo, opposing by whole sign Neptune and Saturn, you know, retrograde, both of them in Pisces. So there's a lot of activity in the mutable signs. And the things about mutability is like, it's like this wavering of light, this change, this back and forth, this decision. So there's this kind of a coming to a head, an illumination, a coming to a head, but you don't have full clarity because it's not that full moon moment yet, but it is growing. Maybe there's a little bit more of an understanding of what this means, but the Mars-Jupiter conjunction itself might be that spark of like, this is what I want to do. Maybe I can try this. You know, Mercury is retrograde. There's things are putting me in a position to have to kind of become inventive, you know, but and necessity is a mother of invention. So again, that's why I say there can be some good positive things that can come out of this, but it will be a little amplified. It might be a little uncomfortable, and within especially the mutable signs of just trying to figure it out, experiment, just like this project is like, we're just going to try it out. We're going to experiment. We're going to see what happens. And this just feels like a charge, like a kind of a rocket fuel sort of a day, especially with that moon over there in Sagittarius. I love it. I think it's hilarious that it's over there.
Yeah. Do you think with Mercury being retrograde that there might be some element of going back to something that you started before with this, that the fresh start could come from something that you have tried before and abandoned, and now you're going to actually start it and see it through?
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, it could be something like, oh, I forgot that I had that idea. I had this really great idea and I completely forgot about it. So maybe it's a return of that, something so fleeting. I just think it's great that Mercury moves fast. He is slow being retrograde, but he is at 0 degrees, 17 minutes. I mean, I believe it might even be the next chart. Let's look and see. Yeah. So this is August 15th. So the next day, that conjunction is still happening, but Mercury is stepping back over into Leo. So there is something engaged with Mercury, and it because the conjunction is happening in Mercury's temple, squaring whole sign Mercury itself before it goes back into Leo. Yes, I could totally see it being a return to something that you might have forgotten about or might have tried once. And yeah, I think that's a good point to remember, that it may not be something brand new, but it might just be something that you've decided to just give a second go.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed was Mars is in its own bound there. And this is from Jen's art. It's not my own quote, but she quoted Firmicus Maternus saying that if a planet's in its own bound, it's as if it was in its own domicile. So while it's there, Mars is very dignified. I suppose with Jupiter not being so dignified, Mars has kind of got the final say.
Yeah.
So that action is going to be taken.
Yeah, and Mercury, the ruler of this, still see Mars and Jupiter. Mercury is now retrograde back in Leo. It has lost dignity. It is now combust because it is 7 degrees away from the sun. So it's being burned up, but it is in its own bound and decan of there, that last degree of Leo. And it can see that the whole sign house of Gemini through a sextile aspect now, as opposed to a square. So while it's lost dignity by sign, it has kind of a, yeah, it does start to feed into that, like, there's something I want to try. I want to try it again. And maybe this time I have a different idea. So the sextile, even though it's that looking back through the retrograde action, sextile towards that of like, let's try something different and see if that works. And sextiles are kind of a hopeful aspect of like, let's see if we can work together. And maybe it won't work, maybe it will, but experiment. It's a nice experimental transit, because this is still happening. I mean, it's just over a period of a few hours, right in the middle of the month. And I think it's funny that they're right there at the middle of degree. The moon, if we go back to the moment it happened, they're at 16 degrees, Venus is at 11, Saturn is at 17, the moon is at 15. They're all right smack in the middle of the mutables. So it's like they're all at their own crossroads at one big crossroads together. So it's like, what are you going to choose, mutables? Like, I know that's kind of like the Achilles heel for a mutable sign, is like, here's 2 options. You have to take one. There's not a third, and you have to make this decision. The moon is there. The moon in an adventurous, brave, mission-driven sign of Sagittarius. It's like, just be bold. Fortune favors the bold. So maybe that's what this day will kind of call for all of us. And that concludes the middle week of August.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for the weekly forecast. You can find more information about Christa and practicalastros.com. You can go to her Twitter, Instagram, and Substack. And on Substack, you find her amazing writing. And she's doing some great projects work there and really leading the way in astrology and writing some really beautiful and thought-provoking articles. So I do really recommend checking her out there. You often hear creators ask you, could you please like and subscribe? And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for small channels. It really does make the difference to allow us to continue to make free content for you, reach the audience that our content is made for. And we can do this with your help. If you've enjoyed it, it gives us immediate feedback on what you're enjoying and what you would like more of. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's a great way for you to support our work and just let us know that you're enjoying what we're doing. So if you have enjoyed this content through to the end and you'd like us to keep making it and make more of it, that's a great way for you to let us know. So wherever you're watching this, please do give us a thumbs up and give us your support. And we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.